Hi, my name is Anthony Caruso, and I'm the publisher of the Capital Sports Report. With this venture, we are bringing you live guests through the Capital Sports Report Live. Today, we are joined by Matt Hagan. But first, I would like to introduce my co host for this episode, and her name is Susan Wade. She's a longtime sports journalist, and we have interacted at numerous events. And she writes for different publications from Competition Plus to Dragzine to Auto Week. Now, I would like to introduce our guest for this episode. His name is Matt Hagan. He is a three-time NHRA Funny Car champion. He won all three NHRA Funny Car championships with Don Schumacher Racing. This offseason, he joined Tony Stewart Racing. Welcome, Matt Hagan.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on the show. Sorry it's a little dark. I'm in my truck.
Matt, how did this deal with Tony Stewart Racing come about that you announced in October to join Tony Stewart Racing with Leah driving the Top Fuel dragster and you driving the funny car?
Yeah, it's something that's kind of been in the works for a little while. I think that we, kind of tossed it around a little bit. And, Tony coming into the sport, basically, he started, making some runs in a dragster and he got bit by the bug, I guess. And, all of a sudden he decided that he'd maybe consider being a team owner. And, I've been very blessed to be with Don Schumacher Racing for the last 14 years. I've had 3 titles there. I've won, more races than I got places to put, trophies up on shelves. I'm very blessed with that. But it's been because I've had a good team around me. And, I wasn't even going to consider the move if I couldn't bring my guys over with me and keep my crew together and keep my crew chief and everybody else, because we've built such a strong bond between, our core guys and our guys that are wrenching, that, unless that was an option, it just wasn't going to be a part of it. And, the thing with Don Schumacher, he's got the DSM, which is the parts and pieces and stuff. And, it's one of those things where without Don selling Tony the parts and pieces and being able to sell the infrastructure, it wasn't possible, because you couldn't round up all the parts and pieces, buying new stuff in time to do that. So really, Tony was able to talk to Don and work out a deal to where he was able to pretty much just buy everything we've been running with a bow on it. And, that's a championship caliber team and car and parts and pieces there. I mean, we won the championship the year before, and we runnered up to Caps last year. I mean, we really won more races than Caps did, and we just had more problems along the way. I had COVID and it set us back, and then I wasn't 100%, and and then we had 2 races that we went out first round, and it doesn't matter whose fault or whatever, this or that. It just, the end result was that we didn't quite get it done, but we had the opportunity to win back-to-back championships, and to be able to take that team and that caliber of people over to Tony Stewart, and have him as a kind of a mentor and a competitive guy, and someone that's really pumped up about the sport and new to the sport and brings a lot of notoriety to the sport. It just made a lot of sense for me to move in that direction.
Could you talk about the comparison in your short time so far with Tony Stewart Racing compared to the gigantic DSR operation that you were so accustomed to?
Yeah, so I've only been to the TSR shop one time. I was working on some of my pedal and some feel on my foot and some different things with my throttle linkage and different things like that, and some pedal angle. But was there, saw the guys, got to kind of feel everything out. The shop looks great. Tony does a good job with moving everything around. I think he put all of his dirt cars, over to one side of the shop, and then we took over to the other side of the shop, and and Leah's people were thrashing to get everything done and get ready, because they're just pretty much doing everything new, rebuilding cars and rebuilding teams, and got a new crew chief in there, which was the assistant, and hired to hire on Don Magala as well. And, just a lot of different things going on over there. I think there was more, I guess, restlessness as far as like on that side of it than there is on my side of it with our team and stuff like that, because it's been such a turnkey operation. But that being said, I think that I'm looking forward to working with Tony, because he's such a competitive guy and motivator. Not that Don's not. I mean, Don's definitely super competitive competitive. We've always strived to win championships. We've always been out there. But Tony was one of those guys that was like, before he even owned the team, he was crawling up underneath my car in the lanes and was like, "Come on, man, let's go do driver stuff." He's like, "Get up on the wheel." He's like, "We got to win this round," just get you pumped up, man. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff to me goes a long ways with, myself and my guys and my crew chief and everybody else. This dude's, showing how invested he is already. He doesn't even own it. So that to me motivated me to be excited to try to, do something with Tony. So there's a lot of comparisons. I mean, this is very brand new for Tony. I mean, I think what we're going to try to figure out is how well Tony does as a leader. I mean, he's a great driver. He's a great owner over on the NASCAR side of things and the dirt stuff. And this will be a new venture for him. But I think it all comes down to how he handles our guys, how he handles the crew chief, how he handles dealing with when things aren't great. I mean, everybody does well when things are great and we're winning races and going rounds, but how he handles the situation and comes in, and how he motivates our guys to bring them back up, or does he one of those guys that chews you and pushes you in the ground? So that's still to be seen. But I from what I can tell, everything has been great. I'm excited about it. I mean, we all have to find how we get out of those low spots. And I think that's what we're going to see with Tony, is what type of leader he is and what he does with our team to bring us out of some of those spots when we get in them. I've learned over the years to become a really good cheerleader. You put your pom poms on and you get everybody pumped back up, and you get back in the car and you go out there and you go and win the next round. But it's tough to do sometimes when you get in a rut. And I've been in ruts before to where you can't get out of first round, and you're better than that, and you're beating yourself up, and the crew chief, he's just not sure what to do sometimes, and then you got your boss chewing on you and yada yada yada. So it's easy to have a downward spiral like that, and so that's where I'm kind of, the question mark is, how is Tony going to handle some of those situations if we do get in a rut? My thoughts, my hopes is that we're going to come out with the, hit the ground running and start sprinting. You know what I mean? Like it's just a matter of everybody kind of clicking, knocking the dust off. And, we already have a championship caliber team that we've kept together over this off season. And, it's a matter of just kind of keeping things moving forward.
Matt, you were with Don Schumacher for so long, and now you're not with him. Could you talk about what you're going to miss, like mentorship wise, guidance wise, that he may not give you now that you're not a part of his brand, his team?
Well, I'm gonna miss the camaraderie with my teammates. I mean, there was always Antron, there was always Caps, there was always, just different characters over there in the DSR field that you kind of have bonded with over the years. And now everybody's kind of doing their own thing. And, I think it's a good thing for Don. Don gets to step back and enjoy life and sell parts and pieces to all these major teams. And, we're still buying parts and pieces from him. And, it's not the pressure of owning all these teams it can be really taxing, keeping the funding going and the sponsors happy and all the other stuff that comes along with it. So, I think that what I'm excited about to see with Tony is that Tony already has a very, very strong infrastructure around him with the people that he has with finding sponsorship on the NASCAR side of things and the Stewart Haas side of things. And he has a huge team around him already that has, unlimited support and unlimited opportunities to go. A lot of times that is really tough out here in this drag racing world is that, you can pitch an idea or have a company come in, and then it's kind of like you still got to do all the legwork and you still got to kind of keep things going. Now, you bring someone in and they kind of, you just turn it over to them and allow them to do what they're paid to do. And, so to me, I'm excited to have that type of infrastructure surrounding what we're doing, knowing the type of the driver I am and the type of team we have. And now that we have people around us out here trying to find more sponsors and more money and know what they're doing with that, I think that's going to be huge.
I think it's Tony and Don have such different styles, and I think their mindset is the same, but win. But I think their styles are just different. And how long will that take you? I think you're both capable. Both teams you are capable of winning a championship with both teams. I think that part's kind of equal, it seems, but it's a matter of getting used to their styles. Do you think that'll take long?
Yeah, I mean, no different than I won multiple championships with different tuners. You know what I mean? Like I run it up a couple times with Tommy DeLago and won a championship with him, and run it up a few times with with Dickie Venables and won championships with him. And, you know, it's adjusting to people's styles and their different ways of how they do things and how they, you know, approach things. And you have to, I think as a driver, you have to be adaptive on the racetrack, off the racetrack, and, you know, whether it's with team leaders or crew chiefs or anything, you know, crew guys that are cycling in and out, you know, you do your best to keep everybody in place and as long as you can, but you realize that you have to be adaptive and, you know, to grow, you have to try out new things. And, you know, for me, it's like, I didn't want to really leave Don Schumacher Racing. I love Don and everything he's done for me. I'm very blessed to be there, but this was a new opportunity. And I was like, what do I have to lose? I've accomplished everything I wanted to in the sport. And you know, for me, I just looked at it as Tony brings a lot of charisma and energy and notoriety to the sport. And, you know, if I want my legacy to grow, you know, it's stepping over there with him to do that as well. You know, it's just kind of a change of pace. Not that I was upset with Don or anything we were doing there. Very blessed to be there, very thankful, very humble. It's just a change of pace. And, you know, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but you don't know unless you try, right?
Right. But one relationship that you still have with you is not only just your team, but you have, you know, Mopar and Dodge, and they've got you know their initiatives, direct connection. They've got the Never Lift, the Power Brokers. It seems like there's a lot of cool new things going on with Dodge and Mopar. Are you?
Oh yeah,
sure what
yeah,
that's
very blessed there. Yeah, very blessed there. You know, I mean, my family, my dad has been a Dodge dealer for 47 years, you know, and we're actually going to be one of the 100 power brokers out there that you can bring your car to. And, you know, basically power brokers is basically show up, you pick your parts and pieces out, and these dealers put these parts on the car. And what's nice is it keeps your warranty, you know, so I can go out here and have a Hellcat and I want to soup it up. Well, if I go buy all these aftermarket parts and I go out there and hang a rod out of this motor, well, it's on me to cover the motor. My warranty's void, you know. So now what's nice with these power brokers, you can go when you find a dealer that is a power broker, like my dad's dealership, Sheeler Motor Mile will be one of them. You know, you can go to that dealer and say, hey, look, I want this piece and that part and this and that put on my street car. And, you know, if it goes out there and blows up, it's still under warranty. So Dodge goes back there and gives you a new motor, new part, new whatever it is. That's not really been done before, you know. So that's huge in itself, you know, as far as, you know, you start bolting on aftermarket parts on these cars and then, you know, something happens, well, you're responsible for it. So I think that's a huge thing that Dodge is going to do with these power brokers and these dealers out here to be able to you know, allow these guys and gals to go out here and have fun with their race cars and you know, street cars and soup them up and take them to the racetrack and do cool stuff with them, and they still be under warranty, you know. So that goes a long way. I've been carrying the banner for Dodge for 14 years in a funny car, and I'm very, very proud to continue that for the next few years. And, you know, and then also, you know, it's nice that we're signing a multi-year deal with Dodge, you know, so it's not just something that it's a year to year. It's going to be here for several years. And that's something that's hard to do in itself in today's economy, in today's world, to know that they're going to still be in the sport and still be strong and still supporting NHRA. I think it's great for our fans and it's great for us.
And another championship possibly. What would number 4 mean for you personally?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I felt like we let number 4 slip through our fingers this year, but you know, I've run it up a few times and you always learn from it, and you always, you know, one that I always recall is my first championship that I lost, and people said, oh, you know, you pouted on the top end and this and that. Well, you know, I was a different individual back then. I was still learning to drive the race car. I was 20 some years old. I was not as mature as I am today. I mean, it taught me a lot of life lessons along the way of how to handle losing and handle, you know, this big pressure of championships and stuff. I mean, it was my second year in a funny car, and I was, you know, worried about driving it, much less win a championship, you know, and I just had to show up and you know, go 2 rounds and I'm world champion, you know, second year driving one of these things, and you're going like, how does this even happen? Well, it didn't happen, you know, and I had to watch it unfold, and it taught me a lot about, you know, not everything that goes the way it's supposed to go sometimes, you know, and adversity and, you know, and feeling that awful feeling of your heart getting ripped out of your chest. And, you know, but I came back the next year and I won a championship right after that, you know, and actually 2 of the 3 championships I won have been after running up, you know, and it just kind of, I think it drives you to kind of be like, man, that was an awful feeling last year, and we don't want that to happen again. So do whatever it takes to make sure that you don't feel that feeling again, you know. And so for me, I think number 4 would be amazing. It's always you can win as many as you can, but I learn from them when we win. I learn from them when we lose, and I think that's the biggest thing is you're always growing as a driver. You're always growing as a competitor, and you learn. I think you learn more from when you lose than when you win.
You have a goal for a number of championships. I mean, John Force has got 16 of them, and I mean, is it the more you win, the more you want, or is there
Well, obviously,
for
we want to win as many as we can. I think back in the day when John was winning all those championships, it was a whole different set of rules and a whole different set of money that everybody was spending. I think the sport is way more competitive now than back when John was doing all that. Not to take anything away from John, but at the end of the day, I think that's why you don't see anyone dominating, and winning so many back to back as far as in funny car goes. Dragster may be a different situation, but the funny car class is so competitive and it changes so much every year. And so yeah, you want to win as many as you can, but you're grateful to be close. I mean, I was very close last year, winning another championship and being in the hunt. And I'm always very humbled and always very grateful that we even have the shot to do it. And that's, to me, I mean, obviously, I want races this year. That's my one. If we do that, then we cover up championships. You know what I mean? So if we hit our groove and we start winning that many races, we usually average 4 to 5 races a year. I want to win 6 to 8. So, if we can do that, and especially peaking in the countdown, and turning things on, I think that, if we can get that many numbers of races, we'll probably end up with what we need to in the end with the championship.
Matt, what is your goal for this season? You're with a new team, but when this new season starts, you're going to have a lot of contenders that are going to be competing for the championship. I know the championship may be the end goal, but you may have some different goals, being that you're on a new team, even though you have the structure of your crew guys being the same as years past.
Yeah, I think no different than what we just touched about. I mean, it's every race is so competitive in funny car. My goals are to just keep my guys on a level playing field, keep them up and positive and moving forward, and knowing that they're learning through the year and we're trying new things during the season, to kind of get ready for that countdown format for when it really does count. I mean, every race counts, but those last, few races is when you have to win 2 or 3 out of those, you know what I mean? And it just kind of is, you got to turn it on and it's got to be perfect. And so really honing our craft all season long to get to that point where those last couple races are perfection, you know what I mean? And that's my goal, is to really hone our craft as a team, as an individual, as a driver, and reaction times and driving the race car to be able to be where we can have perfection at the end of the season.
You have raced with a new body on your funny car. Toyota this season is releasing the Toyota Supra. How do you think their drivers will uh, accept the changes of this new body on their funny car that they're going to compete with this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's always great. Anytime that we changed up, I was one of the first drivers to ever test the new body that came out for Dodge, you know what I mean? And so everybody was like, what's it like, and everything else, and kind of wanting your feedback. And, and it's always great. These engineers are always smart. They're always in the wind tunnel. They're always trying to figure out new aerodynamics. But Dodge is the same way. We're still, looking at new improvements and what we can do different moving forward and different things like that. And I think that for me, it's always been positive. I mean, we took it from, the old style car I was started off driving with, it looked like you cut a 5-gallon bucket out and you're looking at through the end of it at 300 miles an hour. And now it's like panoramic. I got a windshield around me and I can see everything that's going on. So it's anytime you can improve, on visibility and aerodynamic and stuff like that's going to be great. I'm sure those boys are super excited about that, but I feel like our Dodge Chargers can kind of keep up and do what we need to do. I know that we are always running up front and always running big mile an hour. So it don't scare me too much that they're going to set out a new Supra. But like they say, the proof's in the pudding, so we got to go out there and see what's up.
That's the fun part, right? But sort of the talk these days has been about, with Ron Capps going off on his own and Antron going off on his own, is, oh, hey, the new trend is the single car team. And I'm not sure that's true. And I was speaking to Don Schumacher about it, and he's down to a 1-car team now, and he said, no, I think the multiple car teams are the way to go, and that's the way the future of the sport is. Because actually we're still seeing the same people, they're just in different places. And I think I think Antron and Capps are both going to probably move towards multiple car multiple cars in their operation. So do you think multiple car teams are the way to go? I mean, Steve George has proved you don't have to have that, but it's
Yeah,
still
I mean, I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't really think so. I mean, and this is just my opinion because I've yet to really met a crew chief that just was like, we're the same. We're going to share all the information. We're going to do this. I mean, we do learn a lot from each other, and like no different than when we were at DSR, we had 3 or 4 cars there that were all supposed to be the same chassis, but we all ran different clutches and we all ran different things and different stuff like that. So as much as multiple car teams are great, I just don't know that they're necessary. I think that, every year we've always been kind of on our own little island doing our own little thing. And, these crew chiefs, they don't like to share as much as you would hope they would, and it's kind of, and for good reason, they've worked hard to find, like, no different than our chassis, the year we won the championship, Dickie innovated and made these chassis changes to where we had an edge. Well, we won the championship that year. Well, then the next year, Caps had our chassis and Tasca had our chassis, and all these different drivers out there had our chassis that made the car go down the racetrack better, and it would take more power, and we could and we lost that edge, and Nicky had to go out here and find something new and try to innovate again, to do that, so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's multiple car teams are great for the sport. You know what I mean? But do I really think crew chiefs and all these guys share as much as they would like to and give everything they got? I don't think so. I mean, I think that you can get it done with one car race team. I mean, we pretty much have been. I mean, don't get me wrong. We talk and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think these crew chiefs are as buddies as you think they are.
They're going to hold their cards pretty close to their vest, right?
Right.
And this is probably a dumb question, but you and Leah technically are single car teams because you're in different categories, sure, different classes. Is there anything that you two can share beyond track conditions, or I mean, you can share that kind of stuff, but is there anything that's applicable from her car to yours?
Absolutely. I think with us being a dragster, her being a dragster and us being a funny car, I think Dickie is more apt to go over there and help her since we're not racing against each other. If we're like me and Caps used to be, it really took another crew chief to walk over and go like, hey man, I'm lost. Will you help me? And then the crew chief will come over there and do that. But like now that me and Leah's in a dragster and I'm in a funny car and we're not racing against each other, there's that common goal to win both those classes. So I do think that the two crew chiefs work well together and share information of track data and what they're doing. And if someone's in a rut, then they would come over and help out a little bit, because Dickie, I feel like Dickie would be exceptional tuning a top fuel car. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that top fuel cars are extremely hard to tune, but I think funny cars are more difficult to tune than a dragster. So, and they're their own animals. So, I mean, I say that with a grain of salt, so it's one of those things where, but I think Dickie would be more apt to help the crew chief, in top fuel that we're a teammate versus he would, maybe another funny car, you know what I mean? Because we're competitors, right? We all have sponsors and we all have, egos, and we all want to win and we all want that trophy on Sunday. So sometimes you do hold your cards a little closer and you kind of point somebody in the right direction, but you might not be able to, sit there and help them all the time. You know what I mean?
Well, I think Leah's in luck because if Dickie ever has to go over there, Dickie started out, if I recall, in a dragster, tuning a dragster. So working on one.
Dickie's a badass, man. So I'm glad he's in my corner.
A quiet badass.
That's right.
Yeah, not very braggy. He's kind of going under the radar a little bit,
He's a super smart guy. I'm very, very lucky to have Dickie. Can't say enough about him. I know he just lost his dad here last couple of weeks ago, and his dad he worked very closely with in the sport and getting him going with Tobler and all those guys, and so that's such a sad deal for him, and I feel for Dickie. And such as life is really tough to lose your folks. I mean, I haven't gone through that yet. I've lost my brother and understand that kind of pain, but I know how special Dickie and his dad's relationship has been in the past with, the drag races and what they've done. So it's going to be a tough year for Dickie, but we're going to grab him up tight and make him work hard and show him how much we love him. And, hopefully we'll go out here and win some races.
Matt, you talked about Ron Capps there shortly. In December, Ron Capps has launched Ron Capps Motorsports. How do you think he's going to be as a driver, team owner, and now he has to do more things and more focus on some other aspects that he did not have to do before when he was just the driver?
Yeah, I mean, speaking frankly, I think Ron will be fine. He's nothing really changes for Ron. You know, he's controlling the money and where it's dictated to. You know, but he's leasing the parts and pieces and the space from Don, so it's really like nothing changes other than Ron gets the paycheck and decides how much he wants to give to Don. You know, so I think that's really kind of what it comes down to. You know, and Ron's a smart guy, and Ron's been a great ambassador for Napa and does a great job out there, and he's positioned himself to be in the front and you know, as a spokesperson for Napa, and they've rewarded him for that, for all the hard work that he's put into it and done. And but I don't think anything really changes for Ron, other than Ron probably gets to pay himself a little bit more than he's used to.
Susan,
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny because I was talking to Cruz Pendergast at the PRI show, and he brought up a good point. And just I guess it never occurred to me that he said it's going to be really weird not having any DSR cars. And I said, well, we still got Tony. And he said, yeah, but not in our class. He's not racing in my class. And I know you were going to Tony Stewart's team is one of the reasons there's not going to be more DSR 20 cars. But does that seem weird even to you that there won't be DSR cars to compete against?
Well, you know, I mean, obviously, when I stepped into Don's operation, it was a massive operation with a lot going on, and you know, and maybe it's been Don's plan all along to kind of cycle some of this down as he's gotten older, and you know, figure a way to kind of step back a little bit. Whatever that may be, you know, DSR is a single car team right now, but you know, there's still so much that Don's doing in the sport, you know, and we still need Don Schumacher out here in the sport, and I hope he continues to stay out here in the sport, and maybe adds on more cars and finds more sponsors and does more things, you know, but he's still leasing space to Caps and Antron, you know, and they're still the same parts and pieces. I mean, nothing really changed there, you know what I mean? So it's just a matter of you know, Antron owns the team and he delegates where the money goes. You know, same with Ron. He owns the team, but the parts and pieces, the shop space, the cars, the chassis, the trailers, it's all the same. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of someone's writing the check, you know? So you kind of almost consider it still a DSR car, you know what I mean? Because, you know, all that stuff that they do in the R&D side and the fab shop side of things is kind of going to end up on Ron and Tony's and Antron's car, you know?
Those guys, you know, some of the other owner drivers over there have told me that they look at him a little bit differently when they pull up next to him at the starting line, you know, because they'll say, he's where I am because I have 10 million things on my plate. And now,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
here's the thing for me. I think that, you know, Don, what I always, you know, really, I guess, appreciated with Don is that, you know, Don didn't have a budget. Don would spend his own money out of his pocket if we needed to go test or we blew up a bunch of parts or this, you know. So Don, what was the nicety about Don is that when you signed a contract with Don, you knew you were going to have everything you needed to run at the championship side of things. You know, Antron or Caps or somebody goes out here, they start blowing up a bunch of stuff or cycling through a lot of pieces, they might have to skip some races because they can't afford to get there. You know, I mean, that's the reality of the sport. I've been there when I first started racing and owned my own team. You know, I had a budget and we were on fire a lot and blowing up a lot of stuff. And I was like, man, how am I going to finish the season? You know what I mean? So I think that's a reality that Caps and Antron and everybody else has to look at that's going out here. I don't think Tony's in that situation. Tony's a competitor. He has a lot of his own money, personal money that, you know, hopefully he doesn't ever have to spend. But I feel like that Tony's one of those guys that's going to do whatever it takes. But I think you put Ron in that situation, or you put, you know, Antron in that situation where you don't have that Don Schumacher money backing you and making sure you're at every race and paying for all the parts and pieces. And I think that's something they have to look at and make sure they can finish the season sometimes.
When you started out, you were in IHRA and you drove a pro mod. So that was your own operation, so you've been there, right?
Well, I owned a funny car in IHRA as well, and I crossed over to NHRA. So yeah, I got to I got to understand how fast nitro bills rack up and how fast you start spending that budget that you think is all this is going to be plenty, and you start launching bodies off of cars and blowing up manifolds, and crew chief makes some bad decisions, and you have 2 or 3 bad races in a row, and you're going like, man, I don't know if I'm going to have the funding to continue for the rest of the year. So I've been on that side of it. I know how fast nitro eats up parts, and you can budget all that you want, but you don't have that safety blanket like you had with Don owning the team, where Don was like, look, whatever it takes, if I got to dip out of my pocket to make sure we're at the next race, that's what we'll do. And I've seen Don do that multiple times, of making sure that car showed up if it had Don Schumacher Racing on the side of it, or if it or not.
But you spoke about the blowing things up and all that, but it was when I met you was, I think, right after Dale Creasy had his really bad accident at Edmonton, and you were stopping back in Indiana on the way back home to Virginia to talk to Murph McKinney and get your car redone or refitted or something. And so it's safety improvements and things that eat up that budget as well, right? Not just accidents of your own.
Yeah, we're always trying to be safer and innovate, and unfortunately, bad things have to happen for people to figure out a good solution to keep people safer. And that was one of them. And, these cars, there are always something happening, and unfortunately, that's just, you understand that when you crawl in the race car, that anything can happen, and you respect that, and you hopefully are humble when you crawl in there and don't drive over your head. But things happen, and you try to, innovate and no different than Eric Medlin with the head pads and everything else that we have in these cars now. Del Creasy's the reason why our reversers are different than they used to be back in the day. And, just there's just a lot of things that always change. And hopefully nobody in the future has to get hurt to do that. Hopefully some of these engineers are smart enough to see it and head it off before it happens,
But safety improvements also do add to the budget. They cost money.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All of it, no different than coming out with a new body and everything else. You got to go out there and ask sponsors for more money to innovate and be in wind tunnels and, spend that kind of money to do that stuff, to have that edge to be competitive.
Well, they usually say that, like, if you blow up a body, it's like $50,000 down the drain.
Yeah, it adds up pretty fast. You can, you start, blowing up bodies and motors. You think, man, that was a nice Corvette this one could have had, or nice Hellcat, nice Dodge Charger. Yeah, I shouldn't say Corvette. I should say Hellcat or Demon. Or there we go. Let's talk about that instead of a Corvette.
Yeah, you gotta get
I was
the
just
Dodge
thinking about Corvettes because they're cheap.
But usually when you guys have like the like a little fire, they'll like tape it up or do something so they don't have to bring out a new body unless it's completely destroyed, like some funny car bodies have been over the years, including your own.
Yeah, you always try to save them in the pit as much as you can, and some of them are salvageable and some of them aren't. A lot of them will go back and get fixed later on at the shop. We get new honeycomb put in them and new carbon and different things like that. But if you can still run the especially because you bring 2 bodies with you and they're the paint schemes that you need to be running and stuff like that. So you try not to switch them around too much. But ain't no doubt about it. These funny cars are they're nasty sometimes. And they go boom, and you got to deal with the consequences. But yeah, I've learned as a driver, to really start to really pay attention to the motor and to what's going on in your car. And I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, and you hopefully that you learn from those mistakes and you don't do them again, and you can save your team some money and some parts and pieces. And it's a little tough on race day because I have a bad tendency to keep my foot in it on race day, even if I'm getting beat, because you never know what's going to happen beside of you. And I know a lot of guys will click it off early if they're getting beat on race day and different things to save parts and pieces. But that's never been my mentality. It's kind of like run it to the end no matter what, and it's just when it's not your money, it's you feel a little differently about it, but it's you still got to learn to treat everything like it is your money, and be respectful to what's in front of you, and know that these cars are expensive and they cost a lot of money to operate and make runs.
You talked about the motor and maybe getting a feeling or a sensation when the motor is maybe about to explode or something's going to go wrong with it. Could you talk more about that for the fans that don't may not know how you may know that it may explode or something may happen where you're going to haze the tires?
Yeah, a lot of time it's a feel thing. It's learned over time. I mean, it took me 100 runs to feel comfortable in a funny car to where I wasn't going like, oh no, what's this thing going to do to me? And then you start honing your craft of trying to be with the car and feeling what it's doing and listening to the motor and the cylinders and feeling if it's got a cylinder out. That's the biggest thing that you get in trouble with is when it starts putting cylinders out, and then it starts loading the motor up with raw fuel, and then it wants the hydraulic and explode, and just a lot of different things that these things do, smoking the tires and not getting your foot out of it early enough and you're over revving and popping the blower, and, or if it's shaking the tires real hard and, you don't lift and, you end up looking at the wall, just a lot of things can happen in these race cars that become something that you have to make a quick split second decision on. And sometimes it's not always the right decision. I mean, I know I've had cylinders out before and I've legged it out to the finish line and it's blown up as soon as I lift and we won the round, but then it's devastating for the crew guys because you got to drag all these parts and pieces out and stuff, and it's great to get that win, but that win might have cost you, $75,000 to do that. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, man, but that's racing, and it's just no different than like these boys in the circle track, Rubbin's racing, and they'll beat a body to death to try to get an edge, to get that next position. But I think that, over time you learn what to listen for and knowing when the car is not happy and when the motor's not happy and learning to say, hey, look, I pushed it about as far as I can. I better pull my foot out of it here or it's not going to end well, And that's a feel thing. That's a sound thing. And that comes with more laps in the car and slowing your mind slows everything down for you. And you kind of like, you start to, I wouldn't say super slow-mo, but you just start to process things a lot faster in your mind and it becomes more slow-mo and you understand what's kind of coming on with the car.
You look like you've been working out this winter. You look all Hagen-y, you look all fit. How's that been going? What have you been doing?
It's good. Yeah, I finally got my abs back, so I'm happy with that, and I, lean and mean a little bit, but I'm still a big boy, you know what I mean? There's just no way around it. Everybody's kind of going like, what are you doing driving a race car? But, it's just my genetics, I mean, at the end of the day, I can starve myself to death and eat salad and chicken and lose 15 or 20 pounds, or I can eat the way I want to and, hopefully still be okay driving this thing. I'm old now, I'm 39 years old. I feel like an old man, and I just, it's one of those things where, life is pretty short and I love food. And it's just kind of one of those things where I'm going to enjoy my life a little bit. But don't get me wrong. I do think that weight's important. And, it's, if I can, get to a certain weight that I feel comfortable and I feel like I'm still healthy and I'm not starving myself and I feel comfortable where I'm at and the way I look, then I'm happy, And like I said, my abs finally showed back up. So I'm pretty tickled about that.
Well, John Force is ready to kiss you still, so I talked to him earlier this week, and when it came to competition and stuff on the track, he just kept talking about running you. So you got
John's great. Yeah, me and John had a little tiff there for a while, and I had COVID, and I walked over to John after COVID, and I said, man, when you're laying in a hospital bed and you don't know whether you're going to live or die, and they're not telling you too much good news, and you can't breathe and you don't know how things are going to go. And a lot of things are put in perspective. And I walked over to him and shook his hand and I said, we can check all this bullshit at the door. I said, I love you to death. And, you go up there. I said, you do what you do and I'll do what we do. And we just go race these race cars. And he said, Hagen, he said, why the hell did you touch me? He said, you had COVID. He said, you're going to kill me. And I said, no, man, I just wanted to squash our beef, and it's one of those things where I take what I do very passionate. I'm very passionate about it, and I take everything to heart. And it's one of those things. He's a passionate guy too. And when two people like that get together, sometimes it don't always gel, And we're competitors, you know what I mean. And at the end of the day, it's not a anything but that. We're just both competitors, and we both see it different ways sometimes. And you're going to have that. But like I said, after COVID and after laying there in the hospital bed and not knowing whether I was going to die or not, and really truly thinking that and doctors telling you, man, like, you're about ready to be put on a ventilator here, like it's one of those things where you put stuff in perspective and you squash the little stuff and you move forward in life,
Yeah. And Anthony doesn't even know I'm going to ask you this, but I hadn't thought about it till just now. But that's good for the sport when there's a little bit of controversy, a little bit of pushing and shoving or yelling or whatever. I don't think that's such a bad thing. Y'all love each
No,
other.
I mean, rivalries are great. You know what I mean? Like, am I going to get around and smack around a 70-some-year-old guy? I don't think so. It's not going to look good for me, period. So, but, I mean, I thought it was going to happen, when John came over and started poking me in my chest, and was, telling me what he thought and how he was John Force and he could do what he wanted out there. I was like, man, I should slap this guy. But I don't think it's going to go well if I do, you know what I mean? So, you kind of like, all right, John, well, I'm going to get back in my pit vehicle here and you go do you know what I mean? But it just, it's good to have that type of, I guess, adrenaline and passion and that we both think that we're right and, that kind of stuff. It's good for the sport. It's good to have, controversy, I mean, do I think the sport is back in the day where Ace McCullough would get out and, sock you in the face and pull your shirt over your head and brawl at the end? I don't see that happening anytime soon, but those type of differences and not seeing eye to eye, I think is good for the sport. I mean, it's good to have people say, Hagen, I hate you and I love John Force and yada yada yada. It's like, but there's people that love you and they love to hate you. You know what I mean? Like that's good for the sport. You got to have people that love you and you got to have people that love to hate you.
Nobody hates you, but you brought up something interesting. I remember in IndyCar when Danica Patrick was angry at Dan Weldon and she got out and she shoved him. She confronted him and she shoved him. Now, Dan Weldon was in an absolute no-win situation. Do you stand there and shove a girl, or that would have been bad.
Absolutely not. No. Yeah.
Or do you stand there and look like you're a wimp because you didn't react? I mean, there's just no winning to some of this stuff. But,
yeah. You get your wife to go over there and shove her back. You know what I mean? That's what you.
Well, there you go. You think your wife?
Probably not. She's pretty timid, so I don't think that would happen either.
Well, you know what? That's good because you don't want to be like, Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen because she gets on social media and tells off everybody and talks. I think that's kind of you don't want your Steph Curry's wife she's active on doing things like that and yelling about stuff, and I think that's you don't want your wife to do that either. So that's for your wife, So. But Anthony, you want to jump in there? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Matt, besides racing and the new responsibilities that you have, which is similar to what you had before with DSR, you may have a new role with TSR. You also have a farming business, your farm that you have in Virginia, and you have the CBD business. How do you juggle everything that you have on your plate every single day?
Yeah, it's a lot, but no different than my race team. I have good people around me that do a wonderful job of keeping things going when I'm gone, and they just are very motivated and driven, and just like my race folks. I mean, they do everything and make me look like a rock star. I just pay the bills, and it's one of those things where you surround yourself with good people and good things happen, and that's what I've done in business and done on the racetrack, and I've been very blessed to have a group of folks on and off the racetrack that work really hard for me and do great things to make good things happen.
In a short time, all the teams, the majority of the pro teams, the nitro teams, are going to Phoenix to test. What is your expectations on those several days that you test in Phoenix with your new team?
Well, yeah, I think you just shake the dust off and knock the rust off, and you go out there, and I'm sure the crew chief has some new things and some more horsepower and some different things he wants to try and see how the fuel curves flow, and just kind of get a baseline for the start of Pomona, and but I've also taken chassis out there that we shook 23 times in a row, and you're on your hands and knees begging Dickie not to drag it back up there to the start line because it doesn't work and it hurts, and it's beating you to death, and and it's just like you've seen a little bit of everything happen at testing. I mean, I've been through after 14, 15 years out here driving a funny car, you've been through it, you know. So testing is very important to shake the dust off of everything and make sure everything's still working the same. And, you know, I mean, even when you front half one of these things, you know, you got to go out there and make a run or two on them to make sure that they're still working the way they're supposed to. And it just takes one or two mistakes out there and, you know, to change up your whole season. And, you know, I've seen guys with just, you know, they put it in the box and they go to the next race and, you know, the wiring, you know, it's like they you know, some mice or something got in the wires, even though it didn't. You know, they're chasing gremlins and they're trying to figure out what's going on, why the card changed from one race to the next, and why are we having these wiring issues or, you know, data problems. And, you know, so I think you can never have enough runs. You know, you can never have enough test runs and to feel confident about what you're doing going into the race. And these races, you know, we get 3 runs now instead of 4 at most of them, and you got to make every one of them count.
How does that change everything? You talked about the 3 runs. It may go back to 4 this season, but if they stay at 3, from the experience that we've had for like the past year and a half for last season as well, how does that change everything? You said make everything count. You can't really mess around and try something that you want to try because you only got 3 runs and you don't have 4 like before.
Well, 3 was a whole lot better than when we were doing 2. You know, I mean, I definitely felt the pressure sometimes when that year we had COVID, that first year, you know, and we were just trying to squeeze races in, and you know, you got 2 runs to make it in, and if you didn't hit it on the first run, you're on the backside trying to get in, so you're slowing your car down to try to just get in the field, and then you're not really set up for race day on Sunday off of 2 runs. So 3, I feel like that we have a little bit more leadway and a little bit more opportunity to maybe have 1 run that's a throwaway run and get the other 2 right. But it always comes down to that first run out of the box. You know, me and Dickie talk about that a lot, you know, being able to have that first run and do well and go down the racetrack and have that data to work off of. All the races that we excelled at, we always did well that first run out of the box. And the races we struggled on the first run out of the box, you know, and it put us behind, you know, trying to play catch up and trying to get our data and trying to figure out the changes on the track. So that's super, super important for us, is to come out of the box and always have that first run and have that data to work off of and have a solid run to you know, for him to tune off of.
And you probably didn't see it because you were sick and in the hospital at the time, but Tommy struggled in your car that first session, and then it rained. And so the biggest race of the year, a very important race for you, and rain just washed out his chances of even qualifying at that race, you know. So
yeah, you know, and it's tough. Yeah, it's tough when you have limited amount of runs, and you know, I mean, that race right there in itself. I mean, when I had COVID, we come back, you know, that put us, Tommy going into that next race, you know, 5 positions back, and you know, Tommy won that race and got us back up to second. But so many things happened last year that really dictated our championship and our outcome. And I'm very proud that, you know, we finished as strong as we did with as much adversity and things that we went through and struggles that we had. You know, I mean, coming back, even Charlotte, I mean, I was still, that whole race, I was still worried about breathing in the race car and could I catch my breath? And, you know, you're still driving, even though I was cleared and I was COVID free, I mean, I still wasn't 100%, you know, and it just, you know, even though I took 2 races off to get there, I mean, you know, COVID obviously affects everyone differently, and it kicked my butt, you know, and I wanted to be back in the race car so bad, but then, you know, you're there and you're focused on like, how, you know, is this nitro going to choke me up real bad, and can I breathe during the run, and how much is the G-force going to affect me? And, you know, so it took me that whole race to kind of get through knowing that everything's going to be okay, you know what I mean? So, and then my mentality and mindset is not 100%, you know, there, but you got to go through it. You got to get in it, you know, and it takes that race to do that, you know what I mean? And then the next race I come back out and I won St. Louis, which was great, but I feel like I wasn't, you know, mentally 100% for that Charlotte race, you know what I mean? And but it just was what it is, you know, and it's nothing you can undo or unchange. And that's the hand I was dealt with COVID and missing a couple races and coming back in my first race or so, you know, kind of like filling it out and not being like, got your game face on and ready to go win the race. You're going like, how's this going to affect me, and how's the nitro, and how's the G-force, and how's the speed, and how my body's going to acclimate back to it, and can I breathe getting out of the car, and, you know, what if I have a big fire and I got to hold my breath? Can I hold my breath long enough? You know, stuff like that. You know, you're thinking about it as a driver. but you don't show it to people. You don't show it to your crew chiefs or your crew guys and stuff, but it's mentally taxing, mentally exhausting, and stuff like that leads into some of the, we're right there in a championship hunt during the countdown with all that happening,
COVID's a whole different animal, but every driver who's ever had, a serious accident has always, it's the racer mentality. You want to get back in the car. You just saw Robert Wickens get back in a car, which was awesome, to see that. But that's the racer mentality. I talked to Kenny Breck. I talked to Derek Daly. Talked to Don Forrest. We all know when he came. He came back 5 months after his big accident at Dallas. Racers just want to get back in the car. But I think that I wondered if you ever even thought of this, is that had you won the championship, if Tommy winning Reading for you there and getting some points, I think in Indianapolis for being out there, whatever, that would have been the first championship that somebody had
as a
had
dual driver.
With the two drivers, or whatever.
Yeah, I told Tommy, I said, dude, I'll be the first one to buy you a ring if we win this thing, and it's just one of those things where, I was glad. I knew Tommy is a wheelman. He's a super competitive, good driver, and I was glad that he was there to drive my race car. I thought if anybody could do it, Tommy could, and he showed his skill set, and he went out there and won the race, and he was able to dedicate it to his dad, and that was a special, emotional moment for him. And Tommy's a great guy and a good friend, and I was glad that he got to come back and do that, and he did a great job. I can't thank him enough for it, and I was the first one to say, hey, dude, like if we win this thing, I'm buying you a ring, you know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those things where it didn't turn out that way, and I have no bitterness about Caps winning. Me and Caps are really good friends. We're still friends now, and we check in on each other, just see how things are going, and it's kind of, Caps took me under his wing and, got me kind of started out here with his family and dinner and showing me the ropes and parking motorhomes beside each other and stuff. And Caps has helped me win a couple championships. That's just the way it went. He took out some people. I remember my last championship, I went over there and kissed him on the helmet because he had beat, I forget who he beat, but I needed him to win the round, and he did, and it was just kind of stuff like that, that helps out, that you don't forget. So as much as I wanted to win and beat Caps, there's no bitterness about him winning the championship,
That was when you, the moment you just talked about, that was Ron Capps defeating Tommy Johnson in a video that I could play right here for you.
It might have been. Yeah, it was me, Tommy, and Caps all running right there, for it. And I think Beckman was in the hunt too.
The two crew chiefs step away from their vehicles. The tension is high here. The semifinal of Nitro Funny Car. Capps Johnson. Ron Capps is 68 on the tree at the finish line. It is over. Matt Hagan's the world champion. Ron Capps is going to the final at 3:9:06, and Tommy Johnson Jr. 3:94.3. He got outrun.
Yeah, it's tough to be sitting in the car and want to be able to celebrate with your guys, just winning a championship.
That would be kind of weird. Everybody's down at the other end. They're back at the starting line, and you're up there, and you jump out, and you're there to woohoo with you,
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, there's some good memories, and you never know how those things are going to come down. But I tell you, every championship, and it seems like comes down to the last race, the last day, and the semifinals are finals.
And I guess that's the way the NHRA planned it when they came up with the countdown.
That's right. That's right.
Matt, you talked about COVID, and when you were in the hospital, you had doctors that were overseeing you, and they might not had known that you were a race car driver, but maybe they did. Was there any pressure of you saying take longer than you needed, because of your situation, and they know how fast you go in this car?
No, I might get myself in trouble here, but I didn't really get much help out of the hospital. It's they threw me on some oxygen, got me on a little steroid for my lungs, but then kind of got my oxygen levels up, and we're like, we need the beds, you got to go, kick me out. I was still in pretty bad shape, to be honest with you. And once I put a press release out, saying, hey, I wasn't going to be at a race, or two, or until I felt like I was, able to come back. I had a family call me up and they said, "Hey, look, we have some hydroxychloroquine. We don't know how bad you are, but we'd love to send it to you and see, how you do with it." And at that point, I was like, "I'll try anything," So within 2 days of taking the hydroxychloroquine, the Z-Pack, the zinc, and the vitamin C, my breathing turned around, my fever broke. It was just unbelievable, to be honest with you, man. Like I said, it's for these doctors not to be able to offer that in the hospitals and to these people that have COVID. It's almost criminal, and it really upset me. It pissed me off, to be honest with you, that I had 2 or 3 doctors that was overseeing my care, and not once did any of them offer that type of treatment to me. And I had to have a fan, send it to me, and something that ended up getting me better. And thank God they did. I'm very blessed. I'm very, very grateful that fan reached out to me, and because I was still having fevers, I was still couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk to the bathroom to take a pee without my hands over my head. I mean, it was so bad. They kind of wanted me to be on a vent, and when I refused it, they were like, "You got to go. You got to get out of here then." So very, very upsetting, as far as the medical field and the industry and what they're doing for people and the treatment that I guess the government or the hospitals are allowing to some of these people. But all I know is that I was able to get on hydroxychloroquine. It really turned me around very fast. It's could have, very well saved my life. I don't know how bad things were going to get. I just know that it was bad enough. I was running 104 temperature. I checked myself in, and they were helping me get my temperature down to where it was controllable, but never would break. And, kind of once I, refused the ventilator, they pretty much kicked me out of there and said, "Good luck." And, so I was very, very blessed to have those fans reach out and send me the medicine that I feel like, got me over, COVID, and moving forward to getting healthier. It was unbelievable how fast that medication started working in my system, and how fast my breathing turned around, and how fast my fever broke after starting the medication. So, a little upsetting with our medical industry and where we're at in the United States with treating all these folks with COVID. But that's my personal experience with it, and I feel like I can speak on it because I went through it, and it's real, and it's what happened to me, and that's my take on it.
And thank God for NHRA fans and that one in particular.
Yeah, 100%. Very blessed.
We're so glad that we have you back and have you healthy. So
absolutely.
I have one. Something came up today. I was looking at numbers because I know you have 39 victories, and I wanted to see how far. Who was the next person for you to catch on that all-time victories list? And it's Tony Pettergon, who's got 43. So you got a good shot at moving into number 4. But the stat that I thought was, I looked at it and I thought, "Oh, this has got to be wrong." But your career best of ET and speed, and a lot of the top 10 speeds and ETs in your class are back from 2017, and I thought, "Oh, that's got to be a misprint," but I don't think it was. And I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure why that's the case, but you don't usually see records sitting around for almost 5 years. So are we in the
well, it's because the numbers are correct. I mean, we haven't set world records in a long time, and that's because me and Robert Height were about ready to hit 340 miles an hour. And we were just breaking records left and right back when we were laying these headers back and pushing the cars with thrust, and these crew chiefs were just making crazy power, and we had lots of glue on the racetrack, and NHRA said, "Hey, enough, this is too fast, you can't go any faster than this," so they made changes with the glue on the racetrack to pull us back from being able to apply that much power to the racetrack, and also putting rev limiters on us to limit our timing and how much power is down there on the big end and different things like that. It's definitely I think it's good and bad. It's good that they're looking out for our safety, because these tires were starting to rip the centers out of them and different things like that, and you start to end up looking at having some really bad crashes if you start delaminating these tires and different things like that. But it's sad as a driver that we're not setting records out here anymore. I mean, that's what I call on these race cars to do, is to go fast and set records, to win championships, to you're like a gladiator in an arena, man. You pull your mask on and you're like, "Let's go," So So I understand both sides of it, NHRA safety side of it, but also understand our fan side of it and my side of it of wanting to go faster. That's what we get paid to do, So, there's also that side that, these tracks were built back in the day when these cars would only go 200 miles an hour, and we still have the same stopping distance to go 330 miles an hour, So there's that you have to look at as well. So, I hate it for our fans. I hate it for me that we're not setting world records, but I also understand NHRA side of it of why they're trying to keep us safe out there and limit our speed and limit our mile an hour and different things like that to make sure that we're coming back to our families every day and making sure that we're safe out there.
And, crew chiefs are always trying to find new knobs to turn into different things to do. And
Yeah.
He hasn't figured out a way around it, So,
yeah, that's for sure.
A few years ago, Robert Hyatt, I believe, set a record in Sonoma, I believe, and the next day he was joined by the California Highway Patrol in his pits, and he was going too fast.
Yeah, me and Robert we're going back and forth with, setting records, and I was the first ever in the 3-second zone, the first ever in the I guess, what was it? The 390s. It was 399 was the first one I was ever in. First ever in the 380s, and I missed the 3.7 mark by one run with Robert Hite. So he kind of screwed up my little legacy I had going there with being the first into those sub-second zones, and but that's life. Robert has got a great crew chief and a good car, and he's a good driver, and Jimmy Prock always throws down over there. We always have much love and respect for him. Anytime we line up against him, we don't take those guys lightly. But yeah, it was cool, to have me and Robert like that throwing down all the time, and just every time we pulled up against each other, you knew it was going to be a slugfest, and you never knew what was going to pop up on the scoreboard.
And a lot more this year, more the same.
That's right, more to come.
At the 2017 U.S. Nationals, you went 3.79. And you were the fastest at that event at the time.
Yeah, we missed that by Robert did it. I guess the event right before us or something like that. So we kind of missed it by one race or something like that. But hey, that's life, And like I said, I don't see those records ever coming back, So they're kind of set in stone for a while. But it was cool to be a part of that. Cool to be a part of that history, and knowing that you were, breaking records all the time and being able to set new standards and have new goals for people to push forward to try to beat.
Matt, thank you for your time today, and good luck this upcoming season and your first season with Tony Stewart Racing. This video will be on playback on the Capital Sports Report page, also on YouTube and Rumble and other platforms. Thanks again for your time tonight, Matt Hagan.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure. And just want to say thank you to all the fans that listen and are listening now. We truly can't do it without our fans in the sport that show their love, and they show that, how they spend their money is really shows how much love that they put back with our sponsors, and it goes a long ways, and just much appreciated, because we can't do it without our fans in the sport.
And thank you so much for all the work you do with the media, because you're a media dream. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Who knows? I might get, I never know when I get off an interview whether I said something I shouldn't have or not, but I figure the next morning, if I don't get a phone call, I'm good to go,
You're awesome. Don't worry about it. You're all good.
All right. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a great night.
Thanks again. Bye.
Well, thanks.